Welcome back. You're still watching All Angles here on eNCA. Now, today is D-Day for South Africans to give feedback on proposals that may force you to submit biometric information for new SIM cards. An example of biometric information is your fingerprints. Now, concerns are being raised about privacy and data protection from advocacy groups, but ICASA believes the stricter measures will curb the hijacking of cell phone numbers. I'm now joined by Gur Geva, the co-founder and CEO of iiDENTIFii. Thank you very much, Mr. Geva, for your time here on All Angles, and welcome. Firstly, I assume that these new regulations are aimed at protecting us in terms of, crime, maybe, etc. How exactly will this protect the consumer?
Masako, thank you, and thank you for having us on the show. I think very importantly, we must realize what the intention is of these measures. And the measures are there really in order to protect SIM card fraud. So if you walk into a store, a cell phone store, somebody can actually take your ID document, which is available quite easily from all the data breaches and hacks of the dark web, and they can do a SIM swap in your name. What that means is your actual SIM card switches off, their SIM card becomes alive, and then your OTP, or your second factor authentication for logging into your bank, gets pushed to that SIM card that they have. They can log in and they can wipe you out. And it's something that's happening regularly, 91% increase in SIM card fraud year on year. So it's a substantial issue and it needs to be addressed.
Will this also assist with criminal cases as far as police investigations, for instance?
Yeah, I think there definitely is a potential to do that. Of course, SIM cards are a means of communication, of WhatsApp, of telephone conversations for individuals who are committing crimes. It could be child trafficking, human trafficking, organ trafficking, and those proceeds, those money laundering proceeds are often linked to SIM cards. Now, it's very important that the regulators and that the law enforcement have the ability to understand who is actually communicating on the SIM card. Because the moment people commit crimes, they want to be dissociated from those crimes and those SIM cards, and they leave innocent people down to the SIM cards while they commit crimes linked to those SIM cards.
I want to go back to your first point about a person being able to just get to a cell phone shop and get a SIM card out of your name with your ID if they steal it. So is this probably also a journey for us to stop with the ID documents and maybe just have biometrics for everything when it comes to identifying who a person is?
It's an interesting question. I think one of the main concerns at the moment is, the network operators are suddenly going to have our biometrics. But a lot of the objections haven't realized that we're already submitting our biometrics to the network operator, as you rightly say, Maseko, in the form of an identity document. Your ID document has your photo on it. So when you go to the network operator and submit it, your photo on the ID document, your biometric, is already being submitted to the network operator. To your second point is, will this replace entirely, bringing your ID document in? I don't think so. I think that, first of all, the network operators have to establish whether they can access the government database and whether they are or aren't members of SABRIC. Currently, most aren't. And secondly, not every individual's face is inside the government database in terms of a biometric image. So I don't think it will replace it entirely. But if you look at certain European territories overseas, which are extremely advanced, if you look at Estonia or if you look at Belgium, they've got the Smart ID program, the It's Me program. They are replacing identity documents entirely with a form of face authentication for accessing government, telco, financial services right from the mobile handset. So that ultimately is the trajectory, yes.
So iiDENTIFii is obviously in support of these new regulations. What is your response to those organizations who say that this might be a breach of people's privacy, etc.? I mean, biometrics can't be copied, right?
And whether we're in support, I think, is a loaded question. I think that we're definitely in support of an ability to clamp down on SIM card fraud. and to stop identity fraud and theft. That's our mission, that's our vision and our mission statement. In terms of the regulation, there are certain areas of the regulation that do have to be very closely monitored in terms of privacy and protection of privacy. And we need to emulate best practice on how many SIM cards an individual can obtain, what biometric is collected, how long is that biometric stored for, the security around the destruction or storage of that biometric, and how distributed that storage is and what purposes it can be used for. I think we need to be very careful while clamping down on SIM card fraud and identity theft not to create an exposure of citizen privacy data. So that component be very securely managed and needs to be limited.
And obviously it'll also help the banks with financial fraud.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the key drivers, right? So as we discussed in the beginning, Masejo, somebody logging into your bank account, getting the 2FA to a SIM card and conveniently wiping out your account, that's happening a lot of the times. And therefore, rather than trying to deal with fraud post SIM card handover, we want to block SIM cards being handed over to the wrong people. And the other concern that we have in terms of the regulation is that there isn't yet any clarity on the form of biometric that the network operators will use. They're talking about face or voice or retina or fingerprint. And the issue there is how do we create that interoperability between all the network operators and also ensure proper standards and regulations and regulation of the quality of the biometric going in to make sure that we have the right person at the other side of the SIM card.
Gur, you gave us a statistic a little earlier. You said SIM card fraud goes up by 91% year on year. Can you just narrow that down for us? Is this a problem worldwide, or is this a problem that we have here in South Africa?
I think, look, I don't want to speak out of turn without the data. I think that's never wise. SIM card fraud is not something that's limited to South Africa. There are many countries that do experience SIM card fraud, and there are many, many countries that do implement the collection of personal data as well as biometrics on initiating a SIM card. And those are very advanced countries. Some of them are Australia, Austria, Switzerland. So I think we must realize that this is not something limited to South Africa, and there are many countries that do experience SIM card fraud and have countered that by introducing biometrics for the SIM card initiation.
All right. Thank you very much for speaking to us about that. I think it's quite an important topic. That is Gur Geva. He is the co-founder and CEO of iiDENTIFii. What you can take from that is that it will protect you from SIM card fraud, which usually then leads to bank fraud and people opening accounts in your name, etc. So today is D-Day. You need to make a comment and speak to government by the end of today's